If you are a leader of a company or you work in innovation management and you want to help your company to grow through innovation, then this video is for you. In this video, I show you how to grow profitably through innovation. I show you a step-by-step innovation framework that actually CEOs and CFOs love and not just the innovation management. Hi, my name is Felix. I work with over 300 companies on innovation topics, developing new business models and helping them with their innovation culture. And I'm also a speaker and author. Let's be honest, most companies, they want to grow, but they don't want just any growth. They want growth without sacrificing profitability. In other words, they want EBIT to grow. And this is an EBIT-focused innovation framework. EBIT is short for earnings before interest and taxes. That's the operating income of a company. And let's keep it simple. There are actually only two options to achieve EBIT growth. One is your revenue growth. Your company grows, you have new products, you enter new markets, and most of the time when you have a scalable business model, your profit will also grow, your EBIT will also grow. I have another video on what makes a business model scalable, so check that out if you think your business model is not scalable. On the other side, you can grow your EBIT when you reduce your costs, right? When you become more efficient. Even if your revenue is flat, you become more efficient, you also grow your profits, you also grow your EBIT. And most companies, they actually already have an idea where they want to grow. They have an aspiration, they have a target where the EBIT should be in the future. And then you have typically cost reduction initiatives, you have revenue growth initiatives, you have all these initiatives in place, but they're not 100%. You always have hope they will result in some EBIT benefits, that your profit will grow, but there's never a 100% guarantee. So at the end of the day, typically, when you're really honest, there is an EBIT growth gap. So this EBIT growth gap is basically the delta between your aspiration, where your EBIT should be in 3 years, and where all your initiatives and your current trajectory will bring you. And what I've seen from many companies is that there is a delta. And then a leader has a million options to close that gap, right? Everyone has a different opinion. Someone says, reduce energy consumption or use data analytics, optimize logistics and inventory. These are all good ideas, but how can you compare them? How can you find out which of these initiatives really move the needle? Typically what a leader is doing, they focus on quick wins and cost savings, right? To improve the balance sheet almost right away, and then some long-term growth initiatives. But in the end of the day, you have to bring both of them together. You cannot just focus on either or, you have to do both. And there's an interesting framework developed by McKinsey in the 90s that is still valid today, and it's the 3 horizons of growth framework. So in this framework, you basically have to focus on 3 different time horizons at the same time, and it helps you to manage that. So horizon 1 is the short-term focus. It's the core business, making that more efficient, making that better. Then you have this horizon 2, the emerging, the adjacent business. So this is everything that is improved, a bit new, it's a bit more risky. And then you have horizon 3, these are the long-term bets. And these things are very risky, but they also might yield a big return. Right? And this framework allows you to think and talk in different time horizons and then also manage these innovations in a different way. And the model I'm presenting today is called the Growth Horizons model. This is basically the 3 horizons plus the perspective of the EBIT growth gap that we discussed before. This is how it looks like. So you start with an EBIT growth gap. So that's the delta. You want to close that with horizon 1 and then with horizon 2 initiatives. And then you also think about horizon 3 because there is some additional long-term potential, and it also might be a kind of security because there might be a disruption coming that you don't have on the radar if you only focus on 3 to 5 years. So this is how the growth horizons model looks in total. So it's 5 steps. The first step is to define a concrete target EBIT. And then the second step is the EBIT growth gap. This is a calculation you do, and then you have a concrete number, and then you look at horizon 1, all the initiatives, things you have in place and things you maybe have to start to close that EBIT growth gap. And the same you actually do with horizon 2, and then at the end you look at horizon 3. So step number 1, define the target EBIT. Typically, this is just a discussion. You don't have to be super precise because if your EBIT target is not ambitious enough, you will realize that through the process. And if your EBIT target is too ambitious, you will also realize that because of the process. and you will have a feedback loop and you can change that number at the end of this program. Then step 2 is to calculate the EBIT growth gap. Let's say you have a number already. This is where your profit, where your EBIT should be in 3 years. And then you calculate this delta. So this is your target number. And then you see like, okay, this is our core business. This is the profit we already do today. And then we include trajectories, right? We look at the market and say like, hey, maybe it becomes more difficult to keep that profit, to keep that EBIT over the long run because of inflation or other price changes or other macroeconomic factors that influence our business model. And most companies, at least that I know, they already have a lot of initiatives going on to reduce some costs. Typically, there are programs, there are projects in place to reduce your costs and also growth initiatives. New products you bring to the market, new markets you want to enter. So this is based on your strategy right now. And then say like, okay, maybe there is an EBIT growth gap because not all these initiatives that will have these benefits we hope for. And so this is the number we will work with from now on. So step 3 is to analyze your Horizon 1 initiatives. And here we need to evaluate these ideas, right? We have a lot of projects going on and we want to make them comparable. So what we do is we calculate the expected EBIT value. So what's the value of this project compared to that project? How much will it benefit our balance sheet? How much will it impact our EBIT in 3 years? That's basically the calculation we are doing here. And that's a simple formula. So it's your EBIT impact and then times the probability, the success probability of being a successful project. If you want to dig deeper into this topic, you can look into the description of this video and you find a link to these slides, but also a more elaborate framework how to do this calculation actually in more detail. So what are the factors to calculate the EBIT impact and the probabilities? But to keep it simple for now, you have an Horizon 1 portfolio and you go through all the projects and you calculate the EBIT impact, the probability, and this results into your expected EBIT value. And as we can see here, for example, project B has quite a low expected EBIT value. And on the other side, the cost per EBIT value is quite high. So it's not a very efficient project. And then we can think, should we shift our resources maybe instead to project D? And maybe this is a new idea, but it addresses a bigger market, a more attractive market. And maybe the probability is still very low, but it's already more impactful, or at least we assume it's more impactful. So we might focus our resources more on this project. And we do a lot of these readjustments of our innovation portfolio based on the expected EBIT value. And then in this example, we already reduce our EBIT growth gap by 700,000 euros. And then in step 4, we analyze our Horizon 2 initiatives. These are initiatives, they're typically a little bit bigger, but they're also more risky. They're more unlikely to be successful. So we go through them and we already see like, okay, we did some work already in Horizon 1, but there's still a lot of work to do, right? If let's say our initial EBIT growth gap was 3 million euros, then we still have more than 2 million euros of a growth gap for Horizon 2. So we will have to come up with new ideas, or we have to redistribute budgets to the projects where we think they have the biggest EBIT impact. So this could look like this. You have the success probability and you have the EBIT impact, and this multiplied is the expected EBIT value. And of course, the most impactful projects, they are here in the upper right corner, and you maybe start some new projects or you scale at least these projects up, and you might stop projects where you think the success probability is very low, or the EBIT impact is very low, or the multiplication of the two factors is very low. So you don't really should spend too much time and money on those. Step number 5 is to analyze your Horizon 3 initiatives. Most companies, if you're not super big, you cannot act like a venture capitalist. You cannot invest in hundreds of projects and ideas. So you have to be more strategic. And you should use this strategic framework here. And this is strategic importance. How relevant will this innovation be in the future? Is this an innovation gap because we think the market is moving towards there, but we don't have anything there? So you need some forecasting, you need to make some analysis, you need to identify innovation gaps to be even capable of analyzing that. And on the other side, that's a strategic fit. Do we have an advantage here? Do we have the resources? Can we use our brand? Can we use our sales channel? Is there a strategic fit? Yes or no, or low or high? right? And everything that is not strategically important, you should either ignore entirely or kill if you already have some capabilities. And then you have the projects that have a high strategic importance. You should start experimenting. Even if you don't have a strategic fit, I would always suggest to either observe or to experiment here, because you might need to build up these capabilities. And experimentation is actually more powerful because you kind of build up some experience, you build up some skills and knowledge in that field. And the other things where you maybe have some capabilities, but they're just, the strategic importance is just, let's say, medium, you still just observe them. Don't invest too much money in them unless you think they become more and more important. Then, of course, you should invest in them heavily. So together, this all looks like this. First, you define your target EBIT. You develop an understanding of your EBIT growth gap. You go through Horizon 1 and 2 to close that gap. You see if your target EBIT is realistic or maybe not even ambitious enough. And then you look at the Horizon 3 to have on the radar what might disrupt your business in 5 or 10 years. If you want to download these slides and with more information on how to calculate the expected EBIT value, then go to the description of this video. I would also be happy if you subscribe to my YouTube channel and also my newsletter, The Psychology of Innovation. Thank you for your attention. See you next time.